Cam McLeod and Briar Schmigelski are facing murder charges in the death of Leonard Dyck, the third victim in those killings in Northern B.C. We are now hearing from some of his family and friends. Megan Roberts is on that part of the story. Those who knew him, Megan, what are they saying?
They say that he was really passionate about his research. He was a researcher, an academic, a professor. They say that he loved the outdoors. He loved camping. Let's take a look at the statement from Leonard Dyck's family. You can see him there. This man was unidentified, and now we know who he is, and we're learning about him, including from this statement from his family, saying that they're truly heartbroken by the sudden and tragic loss. He was a loving husband, a loving father, and his death created unthinkable grief, and the family is struggling to understand what has happened, because certainly there are still so many questions about exactly what happened. In fact, we don't still know really a lot of the circumstances around Dyck's death, other than the two teenagers were charged with second-degree murder in relation to his death. We know that he was a sessional lecturer for botany. That was what he studied, and specifically he studied seaweed and how it changed and evolved when it was exposed to different environments and different factors that way. And one of his longtime friends, one of his longtime colleagues, described not only more about Dyck, but also how he liked to be outdoors, how important it was for him to go camping and be out in nature. Take a listen.
I wasn't surprised to see where he was actually found, because he liked to take these kinds of trips. I mean, we spent time over the years, you know, he'd show me pictures of these camping trips that he took up north. Sometimes he went with his family, sometimes he went on his own. So the location wasn't a surprise, but of course the actual fact of what has happened was a total shock.
Now, Dyck was a sessional lecturer at the University of British Columbia, and they say that the community is really shocked. They're really saddened by what happened. They offered their deepest condolences to his family, and he does leave behind a wife and two sons, Sue Hannah. That's what we know so far about this man that for so long was unidentified. So it's really important that we can now see his face and learn about him.
We do know officials are facing incredible challenges there on the ground in northern Manitoba. And to give us an inside glimpse of what this search entails, our chase team has reached former RCMP officer Sherry Benson-Podolchuk. She is in Gimli, Manitoba. Great to have you on the program, Sherry. Let's get right to it. Bogs and bugs. Is that about the gist of it?
Good morning, Suhan. Yes, that's about the gist of it. And I personally cannot imagine being out there without the protective gear, without a gallon of bug spray, without a tent, without gloves and a hat and everything like that, just to survive the night. Because of course, as you know, when at nighttime the bugs come out, they're even worse. Not only the terrain, which is very treacherous. So if you don't have a flashlight, you don't have good hiking boots, you could twist your ankle, you could fall down the bog, you sink into it. So it's absolutely exhausting having to trek through that, let alone if you're trying to escape, and even more so for the RCMP, who are wearing all their gear and carrying their weapons and other resources that they might need while they're trying to find the suspects.
That's what I want to ask you about. Paint the picture for me. So here's an officer wearing all his or her gear. We're talking about added pounds. We're talking about sweating up a storm. And we're also talking about a fear factor. What if, they do run into these people? What if they are armed? Take me through the mindset.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, you're wearing your boots, you're wearing your pants, you got all your gear, your bulletproof vest, which is it's almost claustrophobic in this kind of heat. And then you have that heightened anxiety. So you have those stress hormones just pulsating through your body. And part of you is, okay, you want to protect. You want to make sure the public is safe. You want to make sure that you are safe, so you get to go home to your family. You want to make sure your partners who are out there are also safe. And you want to make sure the public is safe. So there's so many emotions that are going through your mind as you're out there. And you're thinking about, okay, around the next corner, something might pop up. Is it the suspects? Am I being set up to be shot? Is it going to be, death by suicide by cop? Those things you're thinking about, and they can be very much a reality. So you really, as police officers, I know you're professional, but we're human too, and you can't help but be a little bit frightened or have that heightened anxiety and being hypervigilant. I guess hypervigilant is a more appropriate term.
And Sherry, you know, think about hockey. Players go out there, they do 30-second shifts, maybe a few seconds longer. But these officers are out there for how long? And how often are they getting relief?
Well, I don't know. That would be something you could ask up there, but they don't have a whole pile. It's not like on TV, so you have 100 people coming in and then they all get coffee breaks. No, they're out in the bush. They could be there for hours and hours and hours. And relief might be 4, 5, 6 hours, maybe a whole shift, 10 hours. So it would depend on the fatigue level of each officer, and that they tell the command team that, you know, I'm exhausted, I need a break, I'm tired, I can't walk. And because they're putting themselves at risk, they're putting everyone at risk if they get too tired and they're unable to function in the field. It's okay to take a break, and I think as a command team, that's probably something that they'll be watching for, especially in the heat, and the seriousness of this issue, and they want to make sure that all of their officers are in tip-top shape when they're out there. So taking regular breaks is really important.
In this electronic age, though, one would think that maybe drones could do that kind of work. How important are drones in this search? And could they, in fact, afford, the same kind of eyes-on that boots on the ground would provide?
Well, I think technology really has its place. So the drones, they can move around very quickly. They can hover. They can go down in, and not maybe into the field, depending how what the trees are like, because you don't want them to be ruined. But and they can move faster. So if they get a word that, oh wait, we heard something 200 yards out that way, the drone can move really quickly. Whereas opposed to the officers, depending on where it is and how tired they are, it might be a little bit more challenging. But I think it would be a combination of them both. Drones are very efficient. With technology today, that is a really highly skilled resource to be used. And it can be very efficient in this particular situation for sure.
And we can't forget about the dogs, because there are dog teams out there. What role and how crucial is it that a role they are playing?
Well, the dog teams are brilliant. I've seen them. I've followed one, trying to find a suspect, and he found him up a tree, and we didn't see him, but the dog found him. Right. And it just depends on if it's so much. When the dog team is going out there, they also have officers following, because the dog master is following the dog. He's also armed and highly skilled, but you have to have another team behind him to protect him, and you need more eyes on the ground. So the dog team will move very fast, but then there's the risk of a dog becoming injured, also getting his feet getting stuck in the bog, or cut. You just never know. So there's a lot of things that, even though the dog team is highly skilled, there's some risks to them as well.
As a former RCMP officer, you've been there, done that. Now take me into the mind of the suspects. They don't have the same kind of gear that officers would have, I'm assuming, the chest protectors and all of the stuff that the officers might have. So is it easier for them or more difficult? Because they are also in the mindset of fear and how do we get out of here?
Yeah, and we don't even know if they're getting any help, what kind of protective gear they took out there, what kind of supplies. I mean, last night must have been, or however long they've been out there. I can't imagine how brutal it is. There's certainly that element of fear, and they might be thinking, there's two ways this can go. Are they going to decide to surrender, or are they going to do suicide by cop? And then so their sense of wanting to die is different than the police officers wanting to bring them in safely. They're not thinking about the lives of the police officers, but the police officers are thinking of their lives. And I think there's such a big difference there. And so when you are going into a scene like that as a police officer, you're certainly thinking, I want to come out of this alive, but I also want to do my very best to bring the suspects. The suspects have a completely different mindset. And so there's that element of fear that they may have, but also the fear that we are either going to surrender or we are going to go down guns a-blazing.
Just want to end on one note, and that is the incredible attention from across the country that is on this story, not only in Canada, but outside of Canada as well. There are eyes on, and, you know, media is watching, etc. What are you watching for coming from this background?
Well, I'm thinking of the victims as well. It's just a horror story beyond words for them. I can't imagine. You wake up and you think, is this a nightmare? And no, it's not. And as this is in the news all the time, it must be incredibly painful for them. As a police officer, I'm thinking, I know exactly how scary it is, and that you have to do your job through however hypervigilance you might feel. You still have to do your job, and you're thinking all the time of public safety. You're thinking of bringing in the suspects alive. Hopefully nobody else gets hurt, there's no other injuries. And then you're thinking of, well, this is not a typical Canadian scene. We don't have triple homicides and then suspects fleeing across 4 provinces. This is a very unique experience compared to our neighbors down south, where they have multiple shootings quite often. So this really does make international news, because this is completely abnormal for Canadian societies and as a society. And so we don't have, this is the first time in many months or years that we've had a triple homicide and suspects fleeing. So it certainly has opened the eyes of many people that it can happen here.
I want to thank you for your time, Sherry. Our news team is watching this from all angles, but great to get inside your head. That is former RCMP officer Sherry Benson-Podolchuk. She is in Gimli, Manitoba.